Hello, my name's Joe Cuthbertson. This is Pre-Hospital and Disaster Medicine podcast number 9. And for this podcast, we're looking at a recent publication titled Developing New Information Sheets for Evacuees and Evacuation Centers to be used during all natural disaster phases. This article was written by Mayumi Kako, who's from Hiroshima University, completed her doctorate at Flinders University in Adelaide, South Australia, and is a registered nurse. Welcome to the podcast, Mayumi.
Oh, thank you, Joe. I'm really glad to be here.
Mayumi, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us in this podcast and in particular your research. Can you tell us a little bit about the background to it? In particular, the article mentions that heavy rain and flooding occurred in the Hiroshima prefecture in July 2018 that contributed to the development of these information sheets. Could you tell us a little bit more about the situation there at the time?
Yes, certainly. Yeah. So in 2018, in between July and August, we had a lot of rain, in particular in western part of Japan. So that Hiroshima, particularly around the Hiroshima prefecture area, we have geologically very sand. That used to be a volcano. That's sand, and once there's heavy rain, that mountains are really easy to having a landslide and flooding, and it's a lot of geographical hazards. So we had a heavy rain, and because of that, we had a lot of landslide everywhere and flooding. So that is a that's natural disasters that we had. And because of that situation and seeing the that the population in Japan structure, elderly people more living in the community, so that evacuation from that houses and community safety area was quite problematic. So a lot of people were too late to evacuate, and people just go that landslide and couldn't survive. So that was a situation, and the information sheet why we developed is because of that that people lost their houses and then to the places where they can stay safe. There's not many. They have to have a safe place as an evacuation center, and people that evacuate to the evacuation center, but there is not a consistent form to share information of evacuees, and then that's why we developed. Although there is a national standard recommended form, but that is a very standard. So wherever that the disaster happens, we have to modify it wherever the community needs met, to reflect what we are gathering the information, and then we can, utilize what we collect. So that was a background that we developed the information sheet and the disaster.
Okay, so we've got a national standard for collection of data in that setting, and we've got evacuation centres in place. So the product that you produce, the information form, how do you feel that that's going to contribute to a better quality of life for people in evacuation centres, or contribute to continuity of care for those evacuees or for long-term evacuees?
Yes, I think it's a important point is that the disaster, when it happens, there's a phases, and we tend to just pinpoint the that when the disaster happens very acute phase, and we see the more medical needs side rather than more care or more to the continuation of care that the person needs. So the timeline is more important to see, not only the very acute period of the evacuation or affected people needs, so that we try to more inclusive to see that the evacuees needs to expand not only that disaster onset, rather than inclusive to see after they leaving the evacuation center to the community, to the another places. And I think the point is to see the more continuity of evacuees needs, so that more bridging the more, I guess, person-centered to having a more good recovery into the community, I would say. So that is how we see it's more expanded timeline we could include to the information sheet.
It's an interesting point. The information sheets themselves tend to have an emphasis around oral and dental health care, mobility issues, and mental health. What's been some of the drivers for that? Has there been an identified need for an improvement in that space in evacuation centres?
Yes, I think there's some emphasis has been the mental health, that's first aid, psychological first aid, and so on. So I think there's some highlighted parts for this area, but especially oral dental health and mobility issues. Who need the aids and then access to the oral activities of daily living, kind of care and facilities is not really focused, and we tend to forget about to see these needs when the evacuees come to the evacuation center. So I guess, especially I think oral health is something that we could look up, and especially in Japan, population, that the elderly people are more, 30%, and a lot of people need the dentures and the care, and once they get that poor oral care, and it impact on their after the evacuation, they left the evacuation center, and that means they cannot eat, and maybe nutrition balance is not going well. So I think something that we could highlight to that area that we could more keep eye on as a part of the continuation of the care.
Okay, so it's a great looking product, and recognizing that the article itself was published late last year, they're yet to have use out in the field, or is this changed, or is there an implementation plan to be able to test these and improve that quality of care?
Yes, so this seat is developed after, based on the experience of that disaster, so hasn't been used yet. But what we're trying to do now is talking with the local government, disaster risk reduction people, and that healthcare system who are involved in the health emergency management, so that rather than, I think, when a disaster happens, and then this is a seat that we'd like to use, and then but I think it's important to, before disaster happens, we talk with them, and then what we're going to do if the evacuation set up. And then I think it's important to inform, and then probably we discuss further that how we use this, and in a way of manually, or maybe we could some more digital way to share information, so that it will be more easier to share if there is a more not a localized disaster. If we have a more huge area of the disaster happens, and it will be easier for the both sides. I think it's and in the end, I think it leads to the improve the evacuees and affected people quality of life.
Mayumi, it's great to see products like this produced. They're really targeted at improving the health and well-being of the population that's been impacted. So I really look forward to seeing some research from yourself in the future on the implementation of these forms and how they've managed to get some traction in that space. I'd recommend your article to anyone who's listening here. It's really a pleasure to have you on the show. Was there any final thoughts you had around the research or where you're headed to next around this?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. So what we'd like to do is, I think it's really important to see, this is not only about Japanese context. I think it's global context as well, to see the person-centered recovery. I think Sendai framework was talking about it as well. So I think not only local effort, I think global efforts will be really good, and the benefit to the the people who are involved in disaster medicine or care or disaster health, I think.
That's a great point, Mayumi. Thanks so much for taking the time to share with us your research on this podcast. And thanks to all the listeners out there. Please take the time to read Mayumi's article in the December edition of Pre-Hospital and Disaster Medicine. Thanks again for your time, Mayumi. Hopefully we'll see you soon at a Wadham Congress or similar.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, and see you in the near future.
Bye.